You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Deku Enters Gravity Falls. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of jkawsome on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Izukumidoriya was not having the best day. To be fair, it had started out wonderful. He and the rest of Class 1A were going to the UST to get some rescue training in, and everyone was excited, especially Izuku. After all, rescues were a big part of being a hero, even if it wasn't necessarily as glamorous as fighting villains. But before they could actually begin their training, they were interrupted by people who were, according to Aizawa, real villains. Real villains. Honestly, Izuku wasn't sure whether to be terrified or somewhat excited. He decided on mostly terrified, especially after the Black Misty villain announced that they were the League of Villains, and that they were there to kill All Might. The next thing Izuku knew, he was surrounded by darkness, and falling. Then he hit something hard. Izuku groaned, and got up onto his hands and knees. There was a hardwood floor beneath him. One of the training grounds. It didn't seem like it. It felt too clean. In fact, a glance around revealed he was in a kitchen. Messy, sure, but not a place where one would need to be rescued from. What if that guy's portal dropped us off in some person's kitchen? Oh man, that'd be so embarrassing. A small moan next to him pulled his attention away from the scenery and towards his companions. Uraraka was pulling herself up next to him, so she was here too. At least he wasn't alone. Looking the other way showed Shido and Todoroki were there as well. Uraraka noticed Izuku and her face lit up. Midoriya, you're here, and you're okay. What happened? Where did that guy drop us? Todoroki sat up and scanned over the room with cool eyes. Wherever it is, it doesn't look like the Aussie. It could be that he scattered everyone as far away as he could, but that seems to conflict with their agenda. After all, the villain was obviously trying to keep us from leaving, so why would he send us somewhere else? It doesn't make sense. We should try and look around, see where we ended up. Maybe this house has some clues that'll let us know where we are, Izuku suggested. Shido grinned. That sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. They pulled themselves off the floor when, holy, did a bunch of teenagers just drop out of the sky and into my house? Also, why is one of you pink? What's up with that? Well, that answers that question. We really did fall into someone's home. Izuku flipped onto his back and looked at the man who spoke. He seemed to be in his 60s to 70s, wrinkles covering his face, wearing a black suit and carrying an 8-ball cane. A red fez covered his hair. He glowered at the four of them. Well, I want an explanation right now. Izuku jumped to his feet. We're really sorry, sir. We were attacked by a bunch of supervillains, and one of them apparently could open portals, and he sent us here. Again, we're really sorry. Supervillains? Ha! The man slapped his knee. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You better have a better explanation than that. Izuku frowned. A better explanation. Even for civilians, everyone all over the world knew there was always some problem or another with a supervillain. A villain that could create portals might be rare, but it wasn't that surprising. Something turned inside his gut. The whole situation felt off. Shido crossed her arms. Hey, I'll have you know we're all students at UA High School. Superheroes in training have to deal with supervillains all the time. That might be stretching the truth a bit, Uraraka muttered. Yeah, whatever. If you could help us get back there, we'd really appreciate it. Shido finished. Izuku looked back to the man. To be honest, he was kind of expecting you're UA students? Wow, of course I'll help you. Or something like that. It was what he would have done. But to his surprise, no recognition flashed across the man's face. If anything, he looked even more skeptical. UA? Never heard of it. Sounds dumb. And what do you mean, dealing with supervillains? Those don't exist. And superheroes in training. What, do you think you guys have superpowers or something? You do have the weird outfits to match. Of course we have quirks, Uraraka shot back. Izuku ignored the awkward feeling in his stomach at the mention of that. I mean, she trailed off, frowning. Slowly, her expression became one of absolute horror. What is it? Izuku asked. I can't feel my quirk, she said softly. Her voice rose into a panicked shout. I can't feel my quirk at all. She reached out and gripped Izuku. He braced for the feeling of weightlessness that came with her touch, but to his surprise it never came. It's gone, it's gone. Shaken, Izuku focused in on himself. Sure enough, he couldn't feel one for all at all. It was like he was quirkless all over again. He could hear Ashido's cry and Todoroki's shaky intake of breath. All four of them had seemingly lost their quirks. How was this possible? The old man's gaze softened slightly. Look, if you kids need a ride back to wherever you came from, I can help you. You guys might want to go to a doctor or something though for whatever this is. No, Todoroki said through gritted teeth. We need to use a computer. There's something I want to check out. Izuku glanced at him. Todoroki's expression was almost as stoic as always. He seemed to be taking this fairly well, or as well as anyone could take it. The man shrugged. I don't have a computer, but I've got a bunch of newspapers I haven't gotten around to throwing out yet, if that helps. Todoroki nodded. Yeah, that's fine. What was he thinking? Maybe they were in some alternate universe or something, or in the past. It sounded totally fake, but Izuku had a borrowed quirk, and this man didn't know about Yua. At this point, anything was possible. He, Uraraka, and Ashido followed Todoroki, and the man he needed to find out his name into another room, where the man pulled out a stack of newspapers. Todoroki nodded his thanks and flipped through them. He paused on one of the papers. Here. Uraraka glanced over his shoulder. What is it? Wait, is that in English? Yeah, why wouldn't it be? The man asked. Uraraka frowned. Well, I know English and all, but not super well. But I can read this as easily as if it was Japanese. Ashido glanced down. You're right, Izuku looked down and sure enough, it was easily readable. Very weird, and adding the list of things that were wrong with this situation. The man seemed confused. Did he not realize they were from Japan? He was speaking Japanese, after all. Or maybe not. Maybe they were speaking English and didn't realize it. This was so confusing. He took a good look at where Todoroki was pointing, and it immediately clicked. This is in the past, but I know that date. It's about a week after the first quirked person was born, that baby who glowed. And it isn't mentioned at all, Ashido finished. Weird, she looked up at the others. Do you think we're in some alternate world or something? The man stiffened. A different world? You guys are seriously from another world? That portal thing came from another world? Yeah, Izuku said. Why? Do you know anything about that? The man coughed awkwardly and looked away. Well, a bit, sure. Not much, I mean. But yeah, I've seen some other world stuff before. Never been in one though. So, you guys have superheroes and superpowers and all that junk. Yup, Ashido answered. And it looks like this world doesn't have any of that. We can't even feel our quirks. She shivered slightly. You know anything that could help us get home? Nope, sorry. I mean, if you guys need a place to stay while you're here or whatever, I can help you guys find a room at the local inn. There's not much for a while outside this town. Uraraka twirled her hair around her finger. Thanks for the offer, but do any of you three have money? Oh no. And so that's how the 4 UA students ended up sleeping in the attic of the old man, Stan Pines, whose house was a tourist trap called the Mystery Shack. He had agreed to house them there as long as they worked in his shack. Pay to stay and everything, which made sense, although he did mention they would have to make do with 2 beds and 2 sleeping bags for now. Izuku laid his somewhat dusty sleeping bag next to Todoroki's, while the girls tested out the beds. The attic wasn't huge, but it did give off a somewhat cozy feeling. Stan had gone to the store and come back with a jumble of second-hand clothes so they could change out of their costumes. As it turned out, Stan was hearing the 4 of them in English, and they were hearing him in Japanese. Just another weird thing to add to the list. Uraraka flopped down on her bed. So, we're stuck here in this small town in this shack until we can find a way home, or until someone from our world finds us. As far as we know, we're the only ones who ended up here. We totally missed the rest of the villain invasion in the USG, and we've got no idea how it ended. For all we know, our friends could be seriously hurt, and we couldn't help them. No way, I'm sure Aizawa and 13 beat up those dumb villains, Ashido assured her. But even so, who knows how long we could be stuck here. It could be weeks, or months, or more. We could totally miss the sports festival, and lots of our hero training. We can't even use our quirks. Her voice cracked at that last part, and she pulled her knees to her chest. A miserable expression covered her face. Izuku looked down. Ashido was right. After everything he had gone through to finally become a hero, it could all have gone down the drain due to one villain's quirk. And not just that, but what would happen to One for All now that Izuku couldn't use it? What would happen to All Might? All Might had chosen him to receive his power, and now Izuku was trapped in another world with that power that wasn't working. What if One for All was lost forever? No, I can't think like that. We will find a way home. What concerns me is Stan, Todoroki said. It was weird, seeing the stoic boy in red flannel pajamas. It clashed with the image Izuku had of him. He thought Todoroki would protest to them, but he didn't seem to mind. He's obviously hiding something. I wouldn't be surprised if knows more about this alternate world mess than he lets on. Izuku couldn't help but agree, after seeing how fast Stan had changed his tune upon hearing they were from another world. He tapped his fingers against his leg. So we stay here and work at this mystery shack, figure out as much as we can about this world without heroes or quirks, and work on how to get back. See if we can earn Stan's trust so he'll tell us what he knows. Sounds like a plan, Uraraka yawned. She laid down on her pillow. For now, let's just get some sleep and see what happens in the morning. After the day Izuku had, he couldn't agree more. The next morning, Stan set them to work at the shack. They met his other two employees, a handyman in his mid to late 20s named Suze, and a teenage redhead around 18 named Wendy who manned the cash register. Ashido and Uraraka took out the trash, then took a walk through the town, apparently named Gravityfalls, while Izuku and Todoroki restocked items. Stan wasn't kidding. There's really nothing here, Ashido said when the girls returned. Only weird thing was that for a world without quirks, no one seemed that bothered by me being pink. A couple glances here and there, but that was it. Izuku rubbed his chin. That is odd. There must be more to this town than meets the eye. We should talk to the people who stopped by the shack, Uraraka suggested. They might know if there's anything going on around here. Ashido waved her off. Nah, what we need is to make pals with the locals. They'll probably know what's up more than tourists will. So there they were, busying themselves in the shop, waiting for the afternoon to come when they could get out and explore. Eventually, Stan walked back in the gift shop, having just finished another tour. All right, look alive people, he called out. I need someone to go hammer these signs in the spooky part of the forest. The four students exchanged glances. This could be their chance. Izuku stepped up. I'll go do it. You can count on me. Stan looked down at him in surprise. Well, sure, go knock yourself out, kid. He tossed the wood signs to Izuku, along with a hammer and some nails, which he barely caught in time. Izuku took that as his cue to go and hastily walked out the door. Izuku wandered the forest, putting up signs. So far the town and its surroundings had seemed normal, but he had a feeling there was more to it. A feeling that was only intensifying the longer they were here. It wasn't one he could explain, but it was there all the same, and it certainly wasn't being helped by this walk through the woods. As he rose the nail to a tree and tried to hammer it in, Izuku heard a metallic clang. Curious, he rapped the hammer against the tree. There it was again. A secret compartment, maybe? He felt around the tree until he came across what could be a hatch and pried it open. Inside was a rusty machine with a few switches. He flipped them, and one opened a hole in the ground behind him. Peering in, Izuku found an old, leather-bound book. Picking it up and dusting it off, he discovered that on the cover was an outline of a six-fingered hand with the number 3 inside. He opened the book and inhaled in surprise before coughing out some dust. Finding a way home might not be as impossible as it had originally felt. Todoroki glanced over the back of the chair Izuku was sitting in, Uraraka dangling over the edge of the armrest. Ashido was out, trying to make friends with some of the locals. So, this author talks about all these magical mysteries of Gravity Falls, and mentions something about a dimensional portal for his research. Yeah, although it seems like he stopped writing about halfway through. Maybe he vanished, or really was able to reach another dimension. Izuku couldn't help but feel excited. This could be the big breakthrough they needed to go home. Then we should definitely look into it. Good find, Midoriya. Uraraka smiled and checked her watch. I wonder when Ashido will be back so we can tell her the news. As if on cue, Ashido burst through the door. Hey guys, I'm back, and I made friends with a local. Say hello to Norman. So, we're in agreement that Norman is not a normal man in the slightest? It was 2 hours later and the group, minus Ashido, were gathered in the attic going through video footage. Suze had been the one to suggest gathering evidence, even mentioning that he thought the mailman might be a werewolf. Izuku would have to see that one to believe it. I think that's obvious, even if Ashido refuses to see it, Todoroki said, motioning towards the camera. In a world with no quirks, this guy sticks his arm through a glass window like it's nothing, got hit in the head with a frisbee and fell down flat, again with no injuries, and, hang on, did his hand just fall off? Izuku hastily rewound the tape, and sure enough Norman's hand had fallen off, and he had hastily put it back on. Nothing too strange in their world maybe, but in this one. You know, Uraraka said slowly, I'm beginning to think we made a mistake in leaving Ashido to head into the woods alone with him. The three of them stared at each other in silence, then at once shot up and ran down the stairs and out the door. Stan seemed to be entertaining a bunch of tourists with a rock that looked like a face, and they decided to leave him alone. Izuku looked around frantically, spotting Wendy driving a golf cart. He pointed her out, and they raced over. The older teen didn't even ask for an explanation, just smirking and handing over the keys, telling them not to hit any pedestrians. Izuku took the wheel as the three piled in. Suze walked over to them. Dudes, this is for whatever creature that Norman guy is. He handed Uraraka a shovel, and she thanked him. He then handed a baseball bat to Todoroki. And this is for if you see a piñata. Todoroki had no response to that, merely blinking, and they drove off. As they speed into the forest, Izuku could hear Ashido calling for help. Hold on, he called back. Panic started gripping his chest. He just got dumped in a whole different world with only 3 other people that he knew. He couldn't lose one of them. They followed her voice to find a bunch of gnomes, Todoroki said flatly. Ashido was kicking them off her. Guys, Norman turned out to be a bunch of gnomes that want to make me their queen, and they're total jerks. She punched another gnome away, but more jumped in and shoved her down. Damn it. I could really use my quirk right about now. Uraraka jumped out of the golf cart and brandished her shovel menacingly. Hey, let go of our friend, you tiny jerks. One of the gnomes turned to face her. You think you can stop us, girl? The gnomes are a powerful race. Do not trifle with... She picked him up with her shovel and pushed him aside. Sorry, but Ashido comes before gnome threats. She whacked the ones surrounding Ashido, who jumped to her feet and kicked the rest away. They scrambled into the golf cart and Izuku stomped his foot on the gas. They zoomed away to the sound of screaming gnomes. Phew, thanks guys, those things were creepy. Ashido gave a nervous laugh, like she was trying to play off the fact that a bunch of small old men had just tried to kidnap her and force her to marry them. Todoroki's eyes narrowed. Don't be so sure we're clear. There's always a chance they have more tricks up their sleeves. Uraraka chuckled. Well, how much can they do? Did you see those guys? They were tiny. Of course, just as she said that, large stomping shook the ground beneath them. Izuku, riddled with apprehension, glanced behind them, and his heart almost stopped. Guys? Sure enough, running after them at breakneck speed was a giant tower of gnomes, forming a huge gnome monster like some unholy supervillain trying once again to destroy them. Izuku, Uraraka, and Ashido all screamed, and Izuku swerved to avoid a giant hand slamming down where they just were. The monster sent a bunch of gnomes flying at the cart. Uraraka and Todoroki knocked them away with their shovel and bat respectively. Ashido smirked at the white and red-haired boy as she pulled a gnome off the back of the cart. This isn't exactly a pinata, you know? Todoroki shrugged and swatted another away. I don't care. The cart hit a bump, and Izuku lost control. The four went flying and landed right in front of the mystery shack. Izuku groaned and pulled himself to his feet. The gnome at the top looked down at Ishido. "All right, honey, you ready to come back into the forest with us?" Uraraka glared at him. Like hell she would. "Nah, it's okay." Uraraka whipped around to face Ishido, who was walking forward. "All right, Jeff, you win. I'll marry you." Izuku gaped at her. "Ishido, what are you doing? You can't marry him." Ishido turned around to face them and whispered, "It's okay, guys, just trust me. I know what I'm doing." Izuku gulped. It was true that she was a hero in training like the rest of them, but could they just let her agree to marry the gnomes like that? Think. This isn't like Ishido, from what I know of her. She must have a plan of some sort. Jeff climbed down through the rest of his friends. Family? Izuku wasn't sure. "Well, all right then. See, that wasn't so hard now, was it?" He popped open a box to reveal a ring with crystals on it, which Ishido let him put on her finger. "You may now kiss the bride," she declared. Jeff reeled back in surprise, but quickly recovered. "Well, don't mind if I do." He leaned in and Ishido pulled out a leaf blower which sucked him in, much to his apparent surprise and dismay. She turned to the others and grinned. "I found this when I was taking out the trash for Stan this morning. Guess it really came in handy." She turned to Jeff and glared. "Of course I won't marry you, you creep. You can't just expect to kidnap someone and have them be okay with it." She aimed him up at the rest of the gnomes. "This is for messing with me and my friends." "On three?" Uraraka asked cheerfully. Ishido nodded and beckoned them closer. The four of them pulled the lever back. 1, 2, 3. The shady gnome went flying into the monster, and it collapsed like dominoes, tumbling over one another. The parts that made it up scampered away. Ishido brushed her hands off. "That was awesome, and we defeated those guys even without our quirks. I'd say that makes us pretty good heroes." Izuku nodded thoughtfully. "You know, if all of Gravity Falls is like this, then even though we're stuck here, we might get some pretty good hero training in. Not that it makes up for actual training, or that we shouldn't get out of here as fast as possible, of course," he added hastily. "Just that our skills won't dull as much as they could have while we're here." Todoroki looked like he was going to disagree, but Uraraka and Ishido were smiling at him. "You're right," Ishido said cheerfully. "And we did an awesome job right now." She held out her fist. "Hero fist bump." Uraraka laughed and bumped fists. "Hero fist bump." Izuku smiled, warmth flowering in his chest as he added his fist and words in. After a lifetime being bullied and alone, it was so nice to have friends to do things like this with. They all looked at Todoroki, who looked in thought for another second, but reluctantly fist bumped them, without any words. They all headed into the shack, Izuku feeling light despite their predicament. Inside, Stan was his counting cash. He snorted at them as they walked in. "Geez, you guys look like you got hit by a bus or something." Izuku ignored him, determined not to let the old man's sour attitude bring down his mood. However, after a moment, Stan added, "You know, you boys overstocked the shop this morning, so you four can each take something on the house." Uraraka blinked at the seemingly out-of-character comment. "Really?" Todoroki frowned. Izuku could understand, from what they had seen of Stan, he wasn't one to ever give things away for free. "What's the catch?" Stan scowled, but it had no heat. "The catch is do it before I change my mind. Now get." Izuku took the opportunity to look around for anything interesting. He saw Todoroki grab an interesting-looking pin and putting it on his jacket, Uraraka holding up a necklace with some crystal on it, and Ishido grabbing a grappling hook. What? Stan didn't seem to mind at all, so he turned his attention to what he would get, deciding on a nice pen. After all, he now had a journal to write in. So from what I'm getting from this, the author eventually realized his dimensional portal was too dangerous, and shut it down without ever using it. Izuku told the others, now relaxing in the attic. He was exhausted from the day they'd had, and they weren't any closer to finding a way home. Although, he did mention he was calling someone to help him hide the evidence. Uraraka fiddled with her star-adorned pajamas, watching Ishido as she aimed her new grappling hook around the room. That's a good thing, isn't it? If the author didn't go through the portal, that means there's a good chance they're still here. If we can find him, we can ask them if they know a way to get us home. Now that Izuku thought about it, she was right. The author obviously knew at least some about travel between worlds, which was more than their group knew. They could help them. Who knows? Maybe we've already met them, and we don't even know it. Maybe they're Stan. Or maybe he has a secret sibling who wrote the journals. Todoroki, don't joke about that. Sounds like a plan. Ashido sat down. You know, I've been thinking. We're stuck together in another world, living in the same room together for who knows how long. We should probably bond and stuff that could help whenever we run into problems. She smiled. So, you guys can just call me Mina. Huh. Izuku wasn't expecting that, but bonding together did make a lot of sense. Well then, he rubbed the back of his head. You guys can call me Izuku. His eyes flitted to Uraraka, who smiled at him. In that case, she said, just call me Ochako. Todoroki's expression didn't change, but that was nothing new. If anything, Izuku was getting used to it. Call me Shadow, I guess. Can someone get the light? I got it. Ashmina aimed her grappling hook at the lamp and fired. The lamp shattered and blew away, but the light was definitely out. Got it. Izuku laughed. In spite of all the terrifying and confusing things that had happened the past few days, it was comforting to know he wasn't going it alone. The author of the journal might have said there was no one in Gravity Falls that could be trusted, but when you fall into another world due to a villain attack, then fight off 100 gnomes with a group of people, you know they've got your back. And soon, we'll all find our way home together. Sleep came surprisingly easy that night. Ochako woke up slowly the next morning. Sure, the bedsheets and blankets weren't the most comfortable she had ever been in. Far from it, actually. Yikes, they were itchy, but they were warm, and she didn't want to leave them. The past few days had been so weird and stressful, they almost felt like one long bad dream. Except it's not a dream. That's the problem. She missed her parents. What were they thinking about right now? They had to be worried sick. They had encouraged her to chase after her own dreams instead of following the family business. And now she was trapped in another world because of it. Did they blame themselves? Hopefully not. It wasn't their fault, it was those dumb villains. Her heart ached at the thought of them. She missed them so much. And Yua, and Ida, and their other classmates. At least she had some people with her, so she wasn't completely alone. Speaking of which, she didn't seem to be the only one awake. Reluctantly, Ochako sat up to find To-Do Shadow awake, head resting in his hands and looking contemplative. It was still weird to see him acting so casually. After that super powerful display he showed at the training exercise a few days ago, was it only a few days? It felt much longer. She had gotten the feeling he was a person she really didn't want to mess with. And yet here he was, laying around in a sleeping bag in an attic with the rest of them. It was kinda neat, actually. It made her realize he might be a lot more approachable than she'd first thought. So, she began hesitantly. He looked up. What is it? Crap, I don't have anything to say to him. Well, how are you holding up? Ochako chuckled nervously. It's been a pretty crazy few days and all. So, how are you doing? I know I'm freaking out a bit myself. Shadow looked away. I'm fine. We're heroes. We need to be prepared for any sort of situation. Ochako wasn't sure this counted as a hero's situation exactly. After all, she had never heard of people falling into alternate universes before. That sounded more like something out of a comic book than real life. But it did happen to us. I can't ignore that. Maybe Shadow's looking at it the right way. I just need to relax and think of it as just an obstacle to becoming a hero. She wished she could just be calm like he was. The two sat in comfortable silence until Mina and Izuku woke up. Then the four headed downstairs together. Stan made them all pancakes, grumbling about it the whole time. Although at this point, Ochako was pretty sure they all knew he was more bark than bite. At least when it came to personality, there was always the chance he did know more about their situation than he let on. Izuku flipped through a magazine, and his face brightened. Hey guys, check this out. Mina leaned over. Human-sized hamster balls? That is super cool. I want one. Ochako perked up and leaned over, then deflated. Sure, it looked awesome, but it was $500. Izuku shook his head and pointed to the page next to it. No, the monster hunt. It says here you can get $1,000 if you win this photo contest. We could really use that money, And if there are gnomes in these woods, there's bound to be plenty more things we can take pictures of. Ochako smiled at her friend. That sounds like a great idea. Even if the money won't help us find a way home, we have nothing right now, and who knows when we might need it here. Izuku let out a nervous laugh and gave her an awkward smile. Ochako wished he would be more confident. He was full of awesome ideas. Sweet, we should do it, Mina cheered. And we can get the hamster ball and still have a ton of money left over. Shadow frowned at her. We are not wasting half our prize money for some hamster ball, and that's even if we win the contest. Don't you want to get home? Mina pouted. Geez, Shadow, you're such a buzzkill. Shadow just looked away. Seriously, Ochako wondered about that guy. From what I've read in the journal, there's some pretty cool and mysterious stuff in this lake. We could get some good monster pictures. We could head down there after work today, see if we can find anything, Izuku suggested. The other three quickly agreed, but just as they were working out the details, Stan walked in the room. Shack's closed today, kids. I'm heading out. Do whatever you want. Just don't burn the place down. Ochako smiled at her friends. Or we could go right now. Are you sure this is the right way? Ochako asked her friend. The green-haired boy chuckled nervously and rubbed the back of his head. I mean, it should be. From what I can tell from the map and all, that is. Of course, after that wrong turn a few minutes ago, we might possibly be a little bit off course. We're totally lost, aren't we? Shadow deadpanned. No, we're here, Mina pointed ahead, where a sign saying fishing season opening day was clear to see. From what Ochako could tell, it looked like the whole town was out there. From a woman literally telling the fishes to get into her pan, to a very hairy redhead punching a fish into submission while his sons cheered. Maybe he was related to the werewolf mailman. Izuku cleared his throat. So, where should we start? I mean, it says here there's this cave behind a waterfall that looks pretty promising, so maybe we could try there. Before they could decide, Ochako heard a loud screech. I seen it again. She looked towards where the sound was coming from. A short old man with a long beard that had a band-aid on it. What was that about? Was scampering along, knocking over fishing poles and slapping sandwiches out of people's hands. The Gravityfalls Gobblewonker, come quick before it scrapdoodles away. The four kids walked over as the man started doing a jig. A guy with a hat came over and sprayed him like he was a stray animal. From what he said and how he acted, the man was his father, and this happened a lot. But the old man shouted that he had proof this time, and the students followed him over to his destroyed boat. It was the Gobblewonker that done did it. It had a luong neck like a giraffe, and wrinkly skin like this fellow over here. He pointed at Wait. Stan is here? This is where he was going. It comped my boat up to smithereens, and Sim scammed over to Scuttlebutt Island. He pointed at a nearby island. One of the cops leaned into his walkie-talkie. Attention all units. We got ourselves a crazy old man. The two cops laughed, along with most of the onlookers, but Ochako made eye contact with her friends. They had their monster. Mina beamed. Let's go find this thing. Monster hunt. Monster hunt. Ochako laughed, and Shia Izuku quickly joined in the cheering. A honk made them all look over. Suze was riding over on his own boat, much larger than the others on the lake, with SS Cool Dude written on the side. You dudes say something about a monster hunt? Need a ride? You can totally use my boat. Ochako smiled up at him gratefully. Thanks, Suze. They climbed aboard the SS Cool Dude and headed off. As they went through the fog and neared the island, Mina cleared her throat to get their attention. So, seeing as we're going on a monster hunt and all, I figured we'd need to be prepared. And what's the biggest issue on a monster hunt? Camera trouble. So before we left, I grabbed 17 disposable cameras from the storeroom, so we won't run out. Suze nodded approvingly. Nice going. Also, everyone be on the lookout. In a monster hunt, the side character usually died first. He paused. Wait, am I a side character? Do you ever think about these things? Izuku patted his arm reassuringly. All the time, Suze, all the time. He looked towards the barrel of fish food Suze had stocked. Seriously though, I hope this thing likes fish food. Otherwise, we don't have any bait. I guess we'll find out, Shadow said. They hit the island and climbed out. Ochako held up their lantern light and squinted, trying to get a better look. Is this fog a normal part of this island? I mean, is it here all the time? Or did we just pick a really inconvenient day? She wondered aloud. The five began their trek through the woods. So, I've been meaning to ask, Suze started. How did you dudes end up staying with and working for Mr. Pines anyways? When I asked him, he was all, they fell out of the sky, don't ask questions, except not exactly like that. Mina laughed. Well, he did tell the truth on that one. We're from another universe where we're training to be heroes. But these villains invaded the school and sent us to this world where our quirks, powers don't work, and we ended up in Stan's house. Seriously? Dude, that's so cool. You guys are gonna be superheroes. I wonder if I went to your world, would I get cool powers too? Izuku looked contemplative. That's actually a really good question. Maybe you would. Who knows how that portal works when it comes to quirks? But I'm just surprised you believed us so fast. I mean, it's the truth, so I'm glad. But most people would think we were, lying or crazy or something. Suze simply shrugged. Maybe. But I've seen some weird stuff around that no one else seems to notice much. Also, I really like superheroes, so it's all cool. If you need help finding a way home, I'll totally lend a hand and stuff. Oh, and you gotta tell me about the superhero school sometime too. That sounds super awesome. Ochako couldn't help but grin. Of all the people who could be working at Stan's shack, she was glad it was someone like Suze. He seemed like an amazing guy. Shadow, who was walking in front of them, put a hand back to silence them. I hear something. Mina passed out cameras and they all crept forward. In front of them loomed a monster-like shape and they charged, ready to take some pictures. However, it wasn't what they were looking for. Oh man, Mina sighed. It's just some beavers on a broken boat. It's kinda weird how there's a broken boat in the exact shape of a monster though, Izuku pointed out. I mean, what's up with that? He frowned. Still though, even if we took it at a distance that would make it look like a monster, that wouldn't be good enough to win the cash, and all this will have been for nothing. Ochako punched him lightly in the arm. Hey, don't worry, there's still... A rumble shook the water near them. Hope? The thing that had to be the Gobblewonker rose with a roar and swiped at her with its mouth. She barely jumped out of the way in time. Guys, run! The five of them sprinted away, and the Gobblewonker gave chase, mowing down trees as it chased after them. Mina took out a camera and started taking pictures of it as they ran. They made it to the other side of the island. Hurry dudes, get in the boat, Suze called. They scrambled in. Mina was the farthest behind and tripped over a root in her haste to get in the boat, the camera flying out of her hands. She made to go after it. Hang on, I can get... Shadow grabbed her and dragged her back. Save it, it's not worth your life. Suze pulled the boat away from the island and they took off, the Gobblewonker close behind. They crashed through the same beavers as before, who had somehow made their way over. The Gobblewonker took a swipe at them and they ducked. But everything above the steering wheel was destroyed, and splintered wood rained down on them. Keep on the right side of the lake, Izuku shouted to Suze over the noise of the engine. We don't want to hit any of the people fishing, he flipped through Journal 3. This says there should be a passage behind that waterfall over there. Shadow called over him. That'd be going down a narrow strait. If you're wrong, we're done for, there would be nowhere to go. Just trust me. Suze took his advice and headed towards the falls at top speed, crashing through the falls and hitting the sand behind with such force they all went tumbling out of it. Ochako pulled herself up, sore all over and probably covered in splinters. Then the Gobblewonker came crashing in. A scream tore out of her throat, and Suze pulled them all closer, but... It's stuck, Mina cried, looking up. Ochako followed her gaze, and sure enough, the monster was trapped in the hole, withering around and roaring. Some rocks fell around it as it struggled to break free. She breathed a sigh of relief. That was super close. Picture time. I've still got 9 that aren't cracked, lost, or filled with beaver photos. She passed one out for each of them, and they all took photos to their heart's content. Ochako's heart rate slowly calmed down, the adrenaline from the chase still running through her. Shadow lowered his camera. If the monster is blocking our only exit, then we're trapped in here. Ochako felt her nerves rise up again, but Izuku had a solution. Don't worry, the journal says there's a bunch of tunnels back here that lead up to the surface. If it was right about this cave, then it should be right about that too. Well, that's a relief. Then one of the rocks fell on the monster's head, and sparks sizzled around it. It lay down, as if deactivated. The students and Suze looked at each other curiously, before creeping forward with apprehension. Shadow knocked his fist against the Gobblewonker, and a metallic clang echoed around the cave. He climbed up, the others behind him. At the top was a hatch. But who would randomly pilot a mechanized monster? The question was answered as Shadow moved forward and opened it up. You, old man, you made this? Why? Sure enough, it was the old guy that had been calling about the monster from the start. He shifted around at the attention. I just wanted attention. Ochako frowned at him. You wanted attention? That's why you built a giant monster and tried to kill us. Or did you steal this thing too? Mina's voice was harsher than usual. No siree, I built it myself. Learned to operate a stick shift with my beard too. You see, old folks like me don't get any attention from you youngsters. Even my own son won't let me visit him anymore. So I figured I'd catch his fancy with a 15-ton aquatic robot. Wahaha. In retrospect, it seems a bit contrived. Oh wow, this guy was weird. Ochako wasn't even sure what to do with him. He wasn't really a real villain, and if he could build something like this, he could probably bust out of any jail around here. Not that those cops would even believe them if they even found a way to take him in. Well then, maybe you could just, get your robot out of the way, Izuku asked him. He didn't seem to know what to do either. I suppose so. Welp, time to get back to work on Ma Death Ray. He popped back down into the robot, and they all stared after him. So I guess the pictures thing is a dud, huh? Izuku sighed, running his hands through the sand as they waited for the guy, Fiddleford apparently, to move his robot. Ochako looked at the rest of them. Not necessarily. I mean, they still look pretty real. I don't see why we can send them anyways. It's probably still way more realistic than anything other people will send in. Suze nodded. Fair point, dude. Mina perked up. That's true, but we might want to get some pictures of other creatures, just in case they realize this one's a fake. We can send them under different names, Shadow added in. That doubles our chance of winning. Izuku didn't seem too happy with the idea of sending in fake monster pictures, but he reluctantly agreed. Well then, according to the journal, there should be some glowing creatures called geodites in these tunnels. We can go looking for them now. They got up and set off down the tunnels. Soon, they noticed some strange lights up ahead. Rounding the bend, before their eyes were a bunch of seriously adorable rock-like creatures with legs. They cautiously moved towards the group. A brave geodite walked right up to Ochako and patted her shoe curiously. Ochako couldn't help it. She bent down and picked up the small thing. She's so cute. Can we take her with us? Absolutely, Mina crowed, placing one on her shoulder. I'm calling you Azzy and taking you home. Shadow took photos with a different camera, ignoring the geodite clinging to his leg. No way. Stan probably won't allow it, and it isn't as though we can take them back to our world, which we'll hopefully be going to sooner rather than later. Let's just take the photos and get out of here. At least these things will light the way back. Suze pulled the wrecked and sadly geoditeless boat back to the beach where they had started this whole adventure, pulling up to Stan, who seemed even more grumpy than usual. He looked up at them in surprise. Kids? Suze? What are you doing here? Izuku shrugged sheepishly. We spent the day looking for a lake monster that turned out to be a robot. We've had a bit of a rough time. He hesitated, then added, Got room for 5 more on that boat. Stan looked away. Yeah, whatever. I'm sure you had a great time. Why do you think I'd let you on my boat anyway? You look lonely, Shadow pointed out. What? No way. I've had a great time, making friends, taking to my reflection. I even had a run-in with the lake police. Guess I gotta wear this ankle bracelet now. Ochako winced. You sure you don't want us to come with? We're happy to. Stan hesitated. Then, you kids ever see me thread a hook with my eyes closed? Mina grinned, and they stepped into the boat. $5 says you can't do it. You're on, Ochako blinked. It was the first time she felt they had seen Stan genuinely smile. Izuku grabbed the camera. Everyone say fishing. It was definitely hard being in a new and unfamiliar world. But at least Ochako had people she knew were there for her. Mina would be the first to admit she wasn't the most patient person in the world. Whatever. But they still had to wait 2 whole days to see if they won the photo contest. They should be getting a prize for withstanding the suspense, honestly. Then the real trick of somehow getting the others to agree to get the hamster ball would begin. But Mina was certain she was up to the task. In the meantime, however, they had to find other ways to entertain themselves, like watching Ducktective. For example, Mina leaned up against the couch's armrest as she stared at the screen. "I'm afraid your services won't be required here, sir. My men have examined the evidence, and this is obviously an accident." "Accident, constable? Or is it murder?" "Well, yeah, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be a mystery show," Ochako commented dryly. "Sure, but the fun part isn't realizing a crime was committed, it's who and how," Izuku said. "I mean, to be fair, this is pretty good for a kid's show. I think even Shoto likes it." He nodded towards said hero in training, who didn't respond, eyes fixed to the screen. "Hey dudes, you'll never guess what I found." Suze poked his head around the door. After that big adventure they had shared the day before, Mina decided she liked Suze. He was super nice and willing to go along with just about anything. Definitely more fun to be around than cynical grumpy Stan. The 4 got up and followed him out of the room, Izuku and Shoto somewhat reluctant to leave the show behind. "So I was cleaning up, and I found this crazy secret room, hidden behind the wallpaper," he leaned in. "It's super creepy." Suze opened the door to reveal a ton of wax statues. Shoto automatically backed up. "I don't like this at all. These were here the whole time and we didn't even know," he said quietly. Mina grinned back at him as she walked further in. "Not a fan of strange wax figures huddled together in a room?" She poked one out of curiosity. The thing seemed pretty well built. "I've never seen this guy before. Who's he supposed to be?" Suze frowned in thought. I think that's Larry King. He does interviews. Maybe you dudes don't have him in your world. But I get what you mean, man." He nodded back at Shoto. "It feels like these things are watching me." Ochako inspected a wax figure of Sherlock Holmes. "These are actually really well made. Except for that one, it's like the quality dipped." Izuku nodded towards one figure. Then the figure moved and spoke. Izuku yelped and jumped back. "Don't worry, it's just me, Stan." Mina was not ashamed to say that she screamed just as loudly as the others and ran out of the room. She did feel guilty about knocking over Shoto on the way out though. Oops. The Wax Museum. My most popular attraction. You know, until I forgot all about it. Anyway, I've got all the greats here. Wax Genghis Khan, Sherlock Holmes, some kind of, I don't know, goblin man. He squinted at Larry King. Shoto shuddered. "Seriously? Are none of you going to talk about how strange this whole thing is? This is a weird town. They could be alive or something." Mina was pretty sure that was just Shoto's weird fear of strangely realistic-looking wax figures, but whatever. "And now for my favorite, Wax Abraham Lincoln." Stan gestured towards a melted pile of wax, situated under the one conveniently open window in the entire room. "Wait, what? Seriously, the blinds were open? Damn it." Mina leaned forward to take a look at the wax. Sure, she had only taken the most basic arts and crafts when she was younger, but maybe she could do something with it. She caught Ochako's eye, who grinned and turned to the older man. "Don't worry, Stan. I was big on arts and crafts when I was a kid. I'm sure we can whip you up something amazing." Stan just frowned and walked out of the room, calling "yeah, whatever" as he went. Mina and Ochako stared at his back for a moment, then turned to each other. "You know," Mina started cheerfully. "That almost sounded like a challenge." Ochako smiled. "We're gonna make the best wax statue ever." Izuku wandered over to the pair, Shoto and Suze behind him. He handed them each a pit cola. "So, how's the statue going?" "Awesome," Mina said. She lathered the pants with black paint. "And even if Stan doesn't believe in us, he did inspire our wonderful work of art." She and Ochako stepped back to admire their masterpiece. Needs more glitter." "On it," Suze said. He left the room and returned a few minutes later with a bucket full of glitter. He then dumped said bucket on the figure. Mina smiled. "Perfect." Stan chose just the right moment to walk back into the room. "I found my pants, but now I can't find my he yelped and tumbled backwards, ending up sprawled out on the floor. "Are you all right?" They leaned over him nervously. "All right? I'm better than all right." Stan struggled to his feet. "I thought you kids were kidding when you said you'd make me a statue, but you weren't. You guys have tons of gumption. I never should have doubted you." He threw his hands up. "The Wax Museum is back in business." As expected, the town came in droves. Izuku was there to guide everyone to their seats. Wendy and Shadow manned the ticket booth, which Mina was honestly surprised he agreed to. He had just shrugged her question off though. "We have to stay on his good side. Also, he bribed me." Mina stood on stage with Ochako, ready to show off her masterpiece. Stan cleared his throat and made his way to the mic. "You all know me, folks, town darling Mystery. Please, ladies, control yourselves. As you know, I always bring this town mysteries and befuddlements the likes of which the world has never known. But enough about me. Behold, me," he unveiled the statue. Unfortunately, due to everyone only being there for free pizza, they seriously should have known Stan wasn't going to give out. Things just went downhill. Stan didn't seem too bothered by it though. After all, he still got tons of money from the event. Hot tamales, look at all this cash, and I owe it all to one person. Mina frowned. Just one. She and Ochako had done it together. Stan patted Wax Stan's arm. "This guy right here." "Figures. I don't know what I expected." Stan noticed them. "Oh, and you two also. Now wash up. It's back to work for you tomorrow." She sighed. It wasn't so bad though. Even if it was mostly Ochako, Mina couldn't help but feel like she had just accomplished something really cool, something she could look at and think, "I made this, and it's amazing." It was almost as nice as being a hero. Almost. Mina was waiting outside the bathroom for her turn to brush her teeth when she heard Stan's screams. Panicked, she raced downstairs with the others to find a very headless Wax statue. "Wax Stan, he's been murdered." Stan was shaking and sweating, staring wide-eyed and terrified at the decapitated Wax Man. Not that Mina blamed him one bit. It would be totally unnerving to find someone had chopped off the head of a figure looking just like her. The question, of course, was who and how. The lights of the cop car shone outside the window. It was the first time Mina, or any of them for that matter, had gotten a good look at the law enforcement in Gravity Falls. Mina could almost have believed there was no law enforcement, with everything they've seen, but as it turned out, what they did have was so utterly poor at their job that it didn't really matter. "I get up to use the John right," Stan told them. "And when I get back, blammo, he's headless." Mina got on the ground and studied her sullied artwork. It was a clean cut, but it was still painful. All that hard work and some asshole decided to go and ruin it just like that. Izuku leaned over and patted her shoulder. "Do you know who did this?" he asked the cops. The tall one looked over at the short one. "What's your opinion, Sheriff Blubbs?" The short cop sipped his coffee. "Look, I'd love to help you out and all, but let's face the facts. This case is unsolvable." "What?" Izuku said. "Why, you can't just say that. You haven't even looked around yet. There has to be evidence or something. We can help if you need us to." Shadow was not so polite. "You call yourselves police? This is despicable." Probably not the best thing to say. The cops go on the defensive, mocking Izuku and Shadow for thinking they could solve it, like total jerks, then skipping out to see someone try and fit a whole cantaloupe in his mouth. They were adults, right? Oh yeah, this was Gravity Falls. Izuku frowned at their retreating figures. "Well, since they're obviously not going to help us, we'll have to figure this out on our own." He smiled at Mina and Ochako. "Come on guys, let's figure out who messed up your artwork." "This is taking away valuable time from finding a way home," Shadow muttered. Mina reached over and patted him on the back. "Don't worry so much. And this is important too, you know. Someone or something hurt Wax Stan. For all we know, they could be the key to getting home. Besides," she added slyly, "isn't doing all this detective work going to be good hero training?" "I really don't think so." But in spite of his doubt, Shadow agreed to help. The next morning, the four set up the crime scene. Ochako used toilet paper as yellow tape, and Mina took pictures of their statue. Shadow had set up a board of all their suspects, and Izuku was looking around the floor for anything the vandalizer might have left behind. It didn't take him long. Guys, come check this out. He pulled an actual axe up from behind the couch. Which was super awesome, by the way. You know, if it hadn't been used on their artwork. Ochako took the axe from Izuku and held it up to the light to inspect it. Hang on, didn't one of the wax figures have an axe with them? Maybe someone used that to chop off Wax Stan's head. Izuku nodded in agreement. That's a definite possibility. But we should also look into that lumberjack. He had an axe and was furious enough to punch a tree when he didn't get that free pizza. The four headed out into the shop. Hey Suze, Mina called out. Do you know where we can find that big hairy lumberjack from earlier? We need to talk to him to see if he's the one that cut off Wax Stan's head, Ochako added. Oh manly Dan. Yeah, he hangs out at this crazy intense biker joint. Suze smiled at the students. Dude, this is so cool. You guys are like the mystery crew. Shoto crossed his arms. Don't call us that. They walked outside, where the real Stan was heaving a coffin out of his car. Hey, can you kids give me a hand with this? I'm doing a memorial for Wax Stan. Something small, but classy. He wiped the sweat off his brow. Damn, this thing is heavy. Sorry Stan, Izuku said. We've got a big break in the case. We're going into town to investigate it right now. Ochako lifted up the axe to show it off to him. Stan glanced at the axe. Sounds like something a responsible guardian wouldn't want you doing. Good thing I'm not your guardian. Avenge me kids, avenge me. Sometimes, Mina really liked Stan. Izuku and Shoto had worried about the fake IDs, but Mina had waved them off. If there was anything to be learned in this town, it was that anything goes. For example, the biker joint didn't allow minors that worked in real mines, but they didn't seem to mind minors that were obviously underage. The four got in just fine. The bar itself, of course, was just as Suze described it. Mina was pretty sure one of the guys in there was knocked out drunk, and most of the others seemed to be fighting. They split up, Shoto and Ochako sitting at the bar trying to blend in, where Mina and Izuku went to talk to Manly Dan. So, Manly Dan, Mina started. Do you mind telling us where you were last night? I was punching the clock, he growled. So you were at work? Izuku asked. No, I was punching that clock, he pointed to a broken clock outside, with severe dents in it. It was stuck at 10 when the crime took place. Izuku wasn't done with the questions. So, you've never seen this before? He held up the axe. That thing? Bah, that's a left-handed axe. I only use my right hand. The manly hand. He ripped off the arm of the machine he was fighting, bashing it up while a skinny guy came over and chanted, Get him! Get him! Thoroughly intimidated, the two grabbed Ochako and Shoto and left. Well, it does narrow down the suspects a lot, Shoto said when they told him and Ochako what they learned. Now we just need to find out who was at the opening, and if they're left-handed, and we can get this whole thing over with. Ochako pulled out a list of everyone they had previously thought of. Let's solve this case. So the answer is no one on this list. Mina frowned as she double-checked everyone they had gone over. They had used different measures for each, such as having the suspect sign a signature or catch a baseball. It seemed everyone at the party was right-handed. Maybe it was Stan, Ochako suggested, although she didn't look happy about the idea. Maybe he did it for the drama. Shoto shook his head. He doesn't seem the type to do something if he doesn't get any money from it. Besides, he eats with his right hand. Ochako didn't look like she knew whether to be relieved or not. Izuku was muttering to himself, and Mina felt antsy. How could they hope to be pro-heroes if they couldn't solve a simple case like this? Shoto let out an agitated breath. There must have been something we missed. Let's go over the evidence again. Despite his earlier hesitation, Shoto was obviously as into it as the rest of them were. Kids, Stan called out. It's time for Wax Stan's funeral. Mina exchanged a nod with the others, and they all got up. They could finish solving it later. Kids, Suze, lifeless wax figures, thank you all for coming. Some may say it's wrong for a man to love a wax replica of himself. Suze blew his nose and jumped up. They're wrong. Easy, Suze. Stan looked down at Wax Stan. Wax Stan, I hope you're picking pockets in wax heaven. He teared up. I'm sorry, I've got glitter in my eye. He ran out of the room, with Suze close behind him. Mina got up and walked over to the statue she had been so proud of making. The others joined her. So, now the question is, how do we find the real criminal? They may not be a villain, but we can't just let this slide. Izuku bounced the axe lightly in his hands, deep in thought. Ochako, didn't you say that this axe was from one of the wax figures in here? Ochako nodded. Yeah, that wax woman in the dress had it. Izuku turned to them. And we know anything can happen in Gravity Falls. So what if the one who cut off Wax Stan's head wasn't human? What if they're standing right behind you? The four spun around to see the wax figures in the room getting up before their eyes. The woman grabbed the axe from Izuku's hand before Wax Sherlock Holmes spoke. Congratulations, my four amateur sleuths. You've unburied the truth. Now we're going to bury you. The wax figures closed in around them. Well done, Izuku. You've uncovered our little secret. He pulled out Wax Stan's head, the head Mina and Ochako had spent so long working on. Everyone clapped sarcastically. That's it, nice and condescending. Told you these wax figures were no good, Shoto said. Mina might have been frightened if she wasn't really pissed. You jerks, what gave you the right to mess up our work like that? Why would you do this? Why? I'll tell you why. The figure slammed on the coffin next to her, and she jumped. Because we're cursed to come to life whenever the moon is waxing. After Stan Pines first bought us at a haunted garage sale, we were attractions during the day, but ruled the night. Then the bastard closed up shop and left us to melt. We've been waiting to get our revenge for years. We just got the wrong one. Ochako backed away, horrified. So you were trying to murder Stan for real? Forget vandals. You guys are straight up villains. Izuku and Shoto nodded, and Mina couldn't help but agree. Sure, Stan could be a jerk, but he had proven more than once he really was a good man. She couldn't let them get away with this. Well, now that you know, Wax Sherlock Holmes' eyes rolled up in his head, showing only whites. The other wax figures did the same. You must die. The students backed against the table with food and candles Stan had set up, throwing whatever they could at them. Nothing seemed to work. Mina fought to push away the helpless feeling rising in her. If only I could use my quirk, I could make quick work of these things. Izuku threw the coffee in one's face, and it melted. That it, Mina said. We melt them. They all grabbed candles and charged at their attackers. Mina sliced through wax figure after wax figure. In the corner of her eye, she saw Ochako decapitating Larry King and Shoto sending Genghis Khan into the fire pit. Mina, watch out, Izuku called. She turned to see Wax Holmes taking a sword off the wall and swinging it towards her, knocking her candle out of her hands. Catch! Shoto tossed a hot poker at her. Mina caught it just in time to block Wax Holmes' next swing. He pushed her backwards and out of the room and up the stairs. She looked around to see she was cornered. Wax Holmes raised his sword. Once you people are out of the way, we'll rule the night once again. Ogadogod, she needed a way out, and there. Don't count on it. Mina dove under the figure and dashed to the window. She pushed it open and climbed outside. The wax figure followed her, up and onto the shack sign. He swung down and she swung back with her poker, carefully stepping backwards. Wax Holmes swung again and missed, knocking the S clean off the house. You really think you can outwit me, girl? I'm Sherlock Bleeding Holmes. Have you seen my magnifying glass? It's enormous. An idea struck Mina, and she climbed to the other side of the roof, nearly losing her balance on some loose tiles. Crap, she caught herself just in time, and turned to see Wax Holmes towering above her, sword raised. Any last words? Mina smirked. Yeah. Got any sunscreen? Got any what? Oh, come on. He turned to see the sun rising over the treetops, and immediately started to melt. Outsmarted by a pink child with horns. What a travesty this is. I'll get you for this. But before any getting could be done, he melted off the roof and bubbled away. Mina slumped down and let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, as the adrenaline faded away. That was scary. Scarier than she'd imagined. She'd almost been killed. Stan had almost been killed. How could some wax figures be so scary? Was what a hero was always going to be like? Sure, the creepy gnomes and robot lake monster had been scary at the time, but she hadn't felt like she did now, realizing just how close to death she had come. And yet, she'd survived. She'd won. Mina had protected her friends and new home. That feeling seemed to make up for the fear. It felt amazing. If being a hero always felt like that, then she could definitely look past the fear. And out of nowhere, or maybe not, she felt something else. Like a presence in the back of her mind, alien and inhuman, but not scary or uncomfortable. It felt like it was thanking her. "You're welcome," she thought. The thing seemed pleased. Mina walked inside and back to the room where the wax figures had attacked, to find everything a mess and covered in wax. Izuku and Shoto were mopping the floors, and Ochako was happily putting the rest of the statues in the fireplace, finishing off with wax Shakespeare's head. She noticed Mina and ran over to give her a big hug. "Mina, you're okay?" "Yep," Mina assured her. "And Wax Holmes is no more?" She paused, wondering if she should mention the thing. "There's something else that happened." Stan walked in at that moment. "Hot damn, what happened to my parlor?" Izuku rubbed the back of his head. "Sorry, Stan. Your wax figures turned out to be villains and tried to kill you, so we fought them to the death. I decapitated Larry King," Ochako added helpfully. Stan took in that information. "Ah, thanks kids. Just try to clean this all up, yeah?" He walked out. Mina supposed he'd seen weirder things. Once they had cleaned up the mess and were getting ready for bed, Mina told the others what she had felt on the roof. "It was strange, like something else was there in my mind, but it didn't feel bad or unfriendly. Then it left. It's gone now, but wait, there it is again." Sure enough, the presence was back. Again, not bad, just there. "What?" Mina turned to see Shoto staring into space, looking very weirded out. She turned to face Izuku and Ochako, seeing similar expressions, so they all felt it. It almost seemed amused, then it was gone. "Well," Izuku said, voice shaking. "That was strange. Any idea what that was?" Mina shook her head. "Not a clue. Maybe we can ask Stan tomorrow. He might know. Or check the journal." Izuku brought it out and skimmed through it, but found nothing. They agreed to look into it more in the morning. It seemed the weirdness of Gravity Falls was only getting started. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author jkawsome on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.